So trans ideology largely defends, excuses trans women who are men. They're not a subset of women. They are men who claim to be women, feel they are women, or identify as women, or all of those three things. And so they offend against women and girls at the same rate and in the same way as other men. It's very straightforward. But what trans ideology does is it fools some of the public, it fools some of the legislators, the criminal justice agencies, and some women themselves. I didn't think anyone on the planet would pretend to believe that trans women are women. And I still maintain that today there isn't one person alive that believes that trans women are women. The trans bit is a clue, and the fact that they're men is another one. I think that many people genuinely believe that trans-identified males should be allowed to identify as women, should be given all of the legal rights and access to women-only services and facilities. But I don't think that they think for a second that they are women. We all know the material reality of our biological sex and the significance of that. I do think, and I've really, really spent time thinking hard about this, because the Orwellian madness that surrounds me and has surrounded me with this debate for 2 decades has made me do so. Does anyone really believe trans women are women, trans men are men? No, they don't. And this is how it's got us into the trouble we're in. Because, of course, if you believe that, and if you genuinely put that forward as the thesis and as the basis on which we build society, then of course you will have men going for cervical smear tests. Of course you will have women going to have their prostate examined. You know, you will not be able to organise society in the way that it needs to be organised in a practical way, let alone the rights that women have fought for and won that are now under such great threat that in many countries they're being actually rolled back. Just this week, figures have been published that show that domestic violence incidents, reported domestic violence incidents, which will be a tiny minority of those that happen, are massively on the rise. And yet convictions have plummeted. There has to be some kind of revolution. And I don't mean a revolution like chopping off aristocrats' heads. I mean something truly revolutionary where it's recognised that women live under a state of tyranny, where it's just seen as every day when we open the newspaper and see yet another woman has been killed by her violent husband because she was about to leave him. If we were to say to trans people, as I have over the years, we will help you by giving you pointers as to how you can set up your own refuges, your own rape crisis centres, your own hostels and facilities for trans women only, we will do that because we built ours from scratch with no funding. What we don't want is you in our spaces. And then some trans activists will say, so you're saying all trans women are rapists then? You're saying all trans women are dangerous, predatory, risk to women? And I say to them what I said 40 odd years ago when I first became a feminist, and I was challenged on this by straightforward, ordinary blokes who were just sexist and not pretending to be women. When they said to me, why do you need your own refuges, love? Are you saying we're all rapists? And I said, no, ordinary man with a beard. I'm not saying that. I'm saying enough of you are that we need to make sure we keep all of you out. And that way we stay safe. Right? Yeah. Because we've never said all men are rapists. We've never said all men are potential rapists. We've said we don't know which men are going to pose a risk to us if they come into our swimming baths and changing rooms and refuges. We really don't know because you tend not to have it written on your forehead. And actually, you tend not to look like a nonce or a batterer or a rapist. There's no such thing. It's just men that make that choice to do that have been given carte blanche to do that. And I say the same to these so-called allies. We've never said all trans women, all trans-identified men are going to sexually assault women. They'll just do it at the same rate, the same pattern, the same percentage as other men.
What happened recently at the first Do No Harm conference?
It's a conference organised by medics, by clinicians who are dealing with transgender medicine, therapy and the like. So there are psychotherapists there are doctors, psychologists and everyone that has a stake in this. And what they were doing was looking at whether or not, and I think we all know the answer to this, that children in particular are being harmed by being sent on a trans pathway therapeutically. In other words, the affirmation, a 15-year-old, 16-year-old girl presents at the gender clinic and says, I'm a boy. And the next thing, they're calling her in for her appointment by saying, Mr. Smith. And through to hormone blockers and then cross-sex hormones, surgery, and a life of medicine and surgical intervention. And the speakers were just asking questions as to whether or not, and again, we know the answer, this has been an experiment, a medical experiment on children, and the biggest medical scandal of our time, which it absolutely has, bigger than thalidomide. At least with thalidomide, although it was horrific outcomes and consequences, somebody was trying to actually solve a problem of sickness during pregnancy, first trimester pregnancy, and it ended up with what are known as thalidomide babies. With this experimentation on young people, it's built on an absolute fantasy. It's creating the fantasy, the fiction of a transgender child, rather than looking at why this child is presenting with a myriad of problems, self-harm, eating disorders, the feeling of being trapped in the wrong body, etc. Why aren't they being tackled separately from this ideology imposed upon them, which is that you're trans? And so many of these young people, as we heard at the conference, suffer from some type of autism, experience some type of autism. Now, what was happening outside of the conference, which I saw when I arrived a little bit early, so the baying mob hadn't yet gathered, but there were some protesters with loudhailers and the like. They tried to storm the building. The Antifa men with the black masks, there were lots of women, the trans maidens, the handmaidens, as they may be known, were also there screaming about trans rights, screaming about doctors. So they were saying doctors have no right to look at this huge spike in diagnoses of the trans child, except for just to give them the medication and the treatment that they are demanding. A kind of treatment totally driven, not partly driven, totally driven by ideology. So these protesters outside were banging on the doors, trying to storm the building. Who knows what would have happened if they'd got in the building?
They were really pushing the door open, weren't they?
Oh, completely. I mean, there's footage that I put out at the time on X that shows that they were really meaning it. They wanted to get into that building, and they're these macho men in masks.
Attacking women.
There was a whole female security team, and they were bloody good. And, it was dealt with, and the police finally showed up and did their job.
Yeesh.
But they were a violent baying mob trying to shut down, very eminent professionals that were brave enough to speak out against the grain and suffer the consequences about the biggest medical scandal in our modern day period. And yet they were proven right. Puberty blockers are no longer going to be administered, although cross-sex hormone drugs are for 16-year-olds, which is the next battle.
Yeah,
it's beyond belief. I'm shocked at how bad this has got.
Julie Bindel is co-founder of the law reform group Justice for Women, a researcher, a journalist, and much of her work concerns male violence against women and children. She has a podcast with Kathleen Stock. They're somewhat notorious for being lesbians who reject most of the nonsense churned out by the LGBTQ plus organizations. In their podcast, they chat, argue, rant, and joke about everything and anything of relevance to lesbian lives and beyond. What makes you a heretic? Journalist Andrew Gold believes that in the age of groupthink and tribes, we need heretics, those who use unconventional wisdom to speak out against their own groups. His podcast is called Heretics. I happen to think these people are all super smart and cool. I highly recommend you go watch any or all of the full interviews that I edit and caption. I always link the source in the description. If you like conversations like this and would like to support my channel, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.